You won't believe what happened when my peaceful lakefront property turned into a battlefield. Thanks to one woman who thought she owned the entire neighborhood. I'm talking about Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA who decided my lakefront wasn't really mine anymore. She handed it over to her cousin like it was some kind of family heirloom. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't going to sit quietly and let her walk all over me. What I did next not only shocked her, but left the entire neighborhood speechless. I had moved into this lakeside community 5 years ago, drawn by the promise of quiet mornings, fishing on weekends, and a view that could calm even the worst of days. I paid top dollar for the property specifically because of that small but beautiful strip of land that touched the water. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My escape, my sanctuary, everything was fine until Karen became the HOA president. Karen, a woman who lived 2 houses away, who seemed to have radar for every rule violation in the neighborhood. Her yard was full of no parking signs, her voice louder than a megaphone, and her favorite pastime was telling people what they could and couldn't do with their own property. It started subtly. She'd complain about my fishing gear sitting on the dock, and she said my boat was too close to the community line. I ignored her as much as I could, but Karen didn't like being ignored. That's when she pulled her biggest stunt yet. One morning, I woke up to find her cousin, a smug guy with a brand new kayak, sitting at my dock like he owned the place. When I confronted him, he waved a piece of paper at me, claiming Karen had reassigned the lakefront access to him. I thought it was some kind of joke until I found out. Karen had convinced the HOA board that my lakefront was community property, and had given her cousin temporary rights to use it. I was furious. I had paid for that lakefront, and I had the deed to prove it. But Karen, with her fake smile and HOA authority, acted like I was just borrowing it. I tried reasoning with her first. I walked up to her perfectly trimmed lawn where she was sipping lemonade like a queen holding court. Karen, that lakefront is mine. It's on my deed. You can't just give it away. She smirked. Oh, sweetie, the HOA has the right to regulate community lake access. If you don't like it, take it up with the board. The board, of course, was filled with her friends. Every time I argued, they'd vote in her favor. It felt like I was fighting a rigged game, but here's the thing about me: I don't back down when I'm pushed. I started looking into property laws, HOA regulations, and every legal document I signed when I bought the place. And that's when I found it. A clause that clearly stated my property line extended 5 feet into the lake. Karen had overstepped. That's when I decided I was done playing nice. If Karen wanted to treat my property like hers, fine, I'd give her something to talk about. I spent an entire weekend measuring every inch of my property line, marking it with precision. Then I built a fence. Not just any fence, a towering, perfectly legal wooden fence that wrapped around my entire lakefront, cutting off access completely. It wasn't pretty, but it was solid. I made one thing crystal clear: this was mine. When Karen saw it, her face turned bright red. She marched over, yelling about violating community aesthetics. But I had already filed the proper permits and had every legal document ready to shut her down. The best part? Her cousin stood there, holding his kayak, with nowhere to go. But that was just the beginning, because once the fence went up, Karen didn't just get mad, she declared war. And what she did next almost cost me everything. Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly. If anything, my fence only made her more determined to put me in my place. And trust me, she tried everything the day after I finished building it. I woke up to find her pacing near the fence like a predator circling its prey. She was on her phone, snapping pictures from every angle, muttering things like property violation and community standards. I could tell she was gathering ammunition. By that evening, I got the first of many HOA violation notices. According to her, my fence was too tall, not in harmony with community aesthetics. And my favorite one, blocking shared recreational enjoyment of the lake. I almost laughed out loud. Shared recreational enjoyment? This was my property. But instead of losing my cool, I played it smart. I responded to every violation notice with calm, polite letters. Every single one included copies of my property, deed, my building permits, and a clear reference to the clause that proved my property extended into the lake. I even highlighted the legal parts just in case she couldn't read. But Karen? She hated being outsmarted. A week later, I caught her cousin standing on the other side of the fence, trying to peer through the wooden slats. "This isn't over." "Man," he said, gripping his kayak paddle like it was a weapon. "Oh, it's over for you," I replied. "And if you step on my property again, you'll be trespassing. Want me to call the sheriff and clear that up for you?" He backed off, muttering something under his breath. But I knew Karen was just getting started. 2 days later, I came home to find a notice taped to my door, this time a summons for an emergency HOA meeting. Karen had apparently rallied the entire board to vote on whether my fence would be forcibly removed. I showed up at the meeting prepared. Karen sat at the head of the table, smug as ever, surrounded by her loyal little group. The room was filled with neighbors, most of them whispering, curious to see the showdown. Karen banged her gavel dramatically. "We are here to address a blatant violation of HOA regulations. This fence." She pointed to a picture of my perfectly legal fence projected on the wall is an eyesore, a safety hazard, and an obstruction to community access to the lake. I raised my hand calmly. "First of all, this is private property. Second, I have permits. And third, I have the legal documents right here that prove the lakefront is mine." She smirked. "The HOA board will decide what's legal." When I dropped the bombshell, "Actually, no, you won't," I said, pulling out the official county survey maps. "Because according to state law, the HOA has no authority over privately owned lakefront property. And if anyone tries to step on my property without permission, I'll have no choice but to involve the sheriff's department." The room went silent. You could almost hear Karen's blood boiling. One of the board members, a quiet older man, who had clearly had enough of Karen's nonsense, spoke up. "He's right, Karen. The property line is clearly marked. We can't force him to remove it." Karen glared at him like he had just betrayed her. The vote happened anyway, but it didn't matter. The board ruled in my favor. My fence was staying. Karen stormed out of the meeting, but not before hissing, "You're going to regret this." I believed her. Because the very next morning, things escalated in a way I hadn't expected. My mailbox was smashed in. Boat cover was mysteriously slashed. And someone, I wonder who, dumped a bag of dead fish right at my gate. I installed security cameras immediately. Sure enough, the footage didn't lie. At 2 in the morning, Karen's cousin was caught on camera creeping around my property with a flashlight. That was the final straw. I took the footage straight to the sheriff's department. And when the deputies showed up at Karen's door later, that day, I knew things were about to get real interesting. Karen thought she was untouchable. But now, she was about to find out that pushing me too far was the biggest mistake of her life. Because what happened next? It didn't just silence. Karen turned the entire neighborhood against her. The moment the sheriff's deputy knocked on Karen's door, I knew the tides were finally turning. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand, watching from a distance as Karen opened the door. All smiles at first until she saw the badge. Her smile disappeared. The deputy spoke firmly, holding up the security footage I had given him. "Ma'am, we have evidence of trespassing and property damage linked to your cousin. If it happens again, charges will be filed." Karen tried to play innocent, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Oh, officer, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." But the deputy wasn't buying it. "There's no misunderstanding. Ma'am, keep off his property. Tell your cousin the same thing." The entire neighborhood saw the deputy leave her porch. And just like that, Karen's iron grip on the community started to crack. People whispered. Neighbors who once nodded along to her every word now looked at her differently. The queen of the HOA had been publicly embarrassed and she hated it. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She had one last move, and it was her boldest yet. The very next week, I woke up to find a massive sign hammered into the ground near my fence. Notice of community complaint. Unsafe structure removal pending. Karen had filed an official HOA complaint claiming my fence was a safety hazard. She even convinced 2 board members to back her up. If this complaint went through, The HOA could try to sue me to force its removal. That's when I decided if Karen wanted war, I'd give her one she'd never forget. I spent 2 days gathering every legal document, property, survey, and photograph I had. But I didn't just plan to defend myself, I planned to expose her. When the emergency HOA hearing was scheduled, I made sure every neighbor knew about it. And when the day came, the room was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder, curious to see what drama Karen had stirred up this time. Karen strutted in, acting like she had already won. She stood at the front, clearing her throat. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know this fence is a violation of our community's harmony. It's an eyesore, and it puts property values at risk. The board will vote today to remove it. She looked around the room, expecting applause. Instead, there was silence. That's when I stood up, calm and collected, and walked to the front. Before you vote, I said, placing a thick folder on the table, I think you should all see the truth. I pulled out photos, high-quality stills from my security cameras, showing Karen's cousins sneaking around at night, dumping dead fish on my property, smashing my mailbox. Gasps rippled through the room. Then, I held up the official county property maps. And for anyone who still thinks this fence is illegal, here's proof from the county survey office. My property line extends 5 feet into the lake. The HOA has no authority here. I let that sink in, then delivered the knockout punch. And just so you all know, I've already filed a harassment complaint with the sheriff's office. Anyone tries to touch this fence, they'll be trespassing and prosecuted. Karen's face turned crimson. She tried to speak, but the room had already turned on her. Neighbors started whispering loudly this time. Is that really true? She lied about the property lines. She had her cousin vandalize his stuff. Who does that? One of the board members, the same quiet, older man from before, finally said what everyone was thinking. Karen, you've abused your position for personal reasons. This board will not be voting to remove the fence. In fact, I think we should discuss removing you as president. The room erupted in agreement. People nodded. Some even clapped. Karen's mouth fell open. For the first time since I moved to this neighborhood, Karen had nothing to say. She grabbed her purse, shot me one last hateful glare, and stormed out just like she had when I beat her the first time. But this time, it was over. A week later, a notice went out to the entire neighborhood. Karen had been officially removed. As HOA president, her cousin never came back to the lake. My fence stayed right where it was, standing tall, a reminder that sometimes you have to fight for what's yours. And here's the best part: neighbors who had been too scared to stand up to Karen before started coming by, thanking me for finally putting her in her place. Some even joked that the fence wasn't just wood and nails, it was a symbol of freedom from Karen's tyranny. As for me, I finally got my peaceful mornings back. The lake was quiet again, the way it was meant to be. And every time I sit out there with my coffee, watching the sun rise over the water, I smiled, because in the end, Karen wanted to take everything from me. But all she did was give me the sweetest victory I could have asked for.